being here today and showing up to talk about a very important issue, an issue that's dear to all of us, working people within the state of Alabama and families within the state of Alabama, the overtime bill. And we'll talk a little bit about the overtime and among some other things that we'll go through. But during this time, we want to make certain that we are able to highlight the work and the experience of some of the men and women that are on the front lines that's being impacted by the overtime legislation exemption, and how they will be impacted if this bill is not extended permanently. And so we want to make certain that we're able to hear from them. In addition to these wonderful leaders here behind me at the podium, they'll talk a little bit about some of the things that are on their mind and the priorities that we have around the overtime. I want to share just a quick brief experience for me in a grocery store. I was to go in and get a few items for my family, and overheard two ladies in the grocery store talking about the prices of eggs. And they said, "Oh my God, have you seen the price of eggs?" And one lady said, "Yeah, I see the price of the eggs. I just got to look at this carton. They look like they don't have only a few good ones left. And so let me open this carton up and make sure they're not broken before I walk out of here because of the cost." The other lady said, we're faced with some very difficult challenges today because I have a niece that recently lost her job in the federal government, and we're expecting additional mouths at the table to eat with us, and that's going to be breaking bread with us here for the next several months until we can figure out the situation out on whether or not she's able to get another job or what the situation in Washington, D.C. is going to check out to be in light of everything that's going on around the tariffs and other things. And so my point here today is that the cost of goods and services are increasing at a record number. I noted that there was a tax package that were before the break that was introduced before the break, but also we voted on yesterday to pass a few tax packages that I thought were fairly decent tax packages. However, when I think about those ladies, we talk about 1 cent on a dollar, and you talk about the price of eggs being $5, and you think about, we're talking about 1 cent on every dollar. That's 5 cents savings, and then with the new another cents being proposed at this particular point, so then you're talking about 10 cents. But the cost of eggs have increased significantly over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. And so instead of families being able to feel the impact of the cost of being able to put more money in their pockets to be able to afford the new prices of eggs, instead we focus our attention on eliminating another cent that's not even going to be felt by the men and women and families across the state of Alabama. And so that's why we're so adamant about the overtime bill, is that hardworking Alabamians give them an opportunity to be able to put more money in their pockets so that they can afford that increased price of eggs. Or they can afford to buy or provide for their families or provide for their children's education. Or to just being able to bring $5,000 to $10,000 more dollars home so that their families can make it to the next year. And so being able to take that away from these families is a shame. And so if we don't extend the exemption on overtime, that's exactly what we're doing. We're increasing the taxes of hardworking Alabamians about $230 million, and some have estimates of $500 million, but I don't think that's accurate. But when you're looking at that, these are hardworking Alabamians that are putting in to our economy. This is not money that you're just handing out. These are not handouts. These are dollars that they're earning. You're already getting 5% of their first 40 hours. And what we've seen is a 13.65% increase in productivity, which is $191 million new dollars in FY14 alone. Or an increase of 1.9% of the individual income taxes, which is $131 million alone. Or whether it's buying groceries and putting local sale taxes back into local communities, about $14.3 million in local communities, and 10.3 million at the state. So you're saying $230 million yielded $460 million. I don't know who get better returns than that. Not even David Bronner get those type of returns. And so for me, it's a no-brainer. It's giving hardworking Alabamians an opportunity to take more of their money home, but the dollars that is returning to our economy, is more than paying for itself. It's allowing us an opportunity to add that second proposal that allowed retirees was from $6,000 to the first $12,000 not be taxed. And so it allowed us to add those type of proposals in addition to the overtime bill in order to put more money back in the pockets of hardworking Alabamians. That's what this is about. And so for me, I'm here advocating for extending the overtime bill permanently. There's been a piece of legislation that has been drafted. There are a few things that's in the legislation that I think is important to note, Mike, is that there's an enforcement piece. You heard a lot of people talk about there may be individuals gaming the system. Well, to address that issue, we put in an enforcement mechanism that allows enforcement and rules to be modified by the Department of by the Department of Revenue, giving them the flexibility to make adjustments to the rules and how they're capturing the data. It also brings in ACEs, give ACEs the opportunity to work with the Department of Revenue in order to dynamic score the impact of the overtime bill and how it's bringing more dollars back into our economy and how it's helping working families throughout the state of Alabama. And so there are mechanisms in place that have been put in the new legislation that addresses some of the myths that are out there that I think are just items they're using to try to pour cold water on the legislation, but it's a no-brainer. We saw a recent poll that had 78% of Alabamians support extending the overtime bill permanently, 80% of Republicans, and 74% of Democrats. This was a poll commission. I think I read it on Alabama Policy Institute. And so we appreciate groups like the Alabama Policy Institute and others that have been on the front lines in ensuring that, and also the press, for putting the information out there so that families and people within the state of Alabama would understand the actual impact of this legislation. And there may be some that say that, hey, these numbers don't seem right. Well, guess what? These numbers were provided to me by our Legislative Fiscal Office and the Department of Revenue. So if anyone denying that these numbers are accurate, then those are the sources that we receive this particular information in. So numbers don't lie. Now, if you want to make the numbers say something different, then I understand what your motives are, but numbers don't lie. And so without further ado, I just want to introduce my colleague, Representative Kelvin Lawrence, who will talk to you guys about the legislation and among other things that he has on his mind. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague, the gentleman from Mable.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Leader Daniels. First, let me say that I agree with your observation that hardworking people throughout Alabama are facing increasing amount of anxiety and uncertainty about this economy. As a small business owner, I definitely feel that as well, and so do all of my employees. But one thing has made a big difference, a difference that makes my employees happy and they can actually see. And that is a larger paycheck at the end of the week because of overtime tax exemption. As an employer, this has also helped me when my business has faced workforce shortages because workers are more willing to work overtime if they know it means they will have more money at the end of their week to pay their bills. In fact, one of my employees, who's a great worker, her name is Patricia, who regularly works overtime, told me directly that the increase that she received means that she can take more pay home and she finally can get a little ahead. Not only did it ease some of her pain, dealing with the rising prices at the grocery store and her recent increase in the cost of rent. But she has finally been able to do something special for herself, and that's to get her nails done. She's earned it, and she deserves it. It seems like something small, but it meant the world to her that she can finally do something that she's been wanting to do for a long time, and it was because of the overtax exemption. But the truth is that someone like Patricia, who is always willing to go the extra mile, to put in the extra effort, who works eagerly long hours, and who is determined to get ahead, she should be rewarded for working overtime. It is also that because she has a little discretionary income, that she can do some of the things that she really likes to do. By doing that, Patricia not only supports a local business, but it also adds to our state economy. In fact, we can easily see the effects of this tax cut when we look at the state coffers via the sales tax. Corporate tax receipts are up almost 14%, and individual tax receipts are up almost 20%. Overall, the most recent data shows that the exemption of state tax on overtime pay allow overtime workers to keep over $230 million of their hard-earned paychecks, much of which they spend in the local economy. That money has helped ordinary hard-working people like Patricia get ahead. It fuels the economy. It helps ease the economic uncertainty for small business owners like myself, who often struggle with workplace shortages, and it also helps our tight labor market. That's also why I support the pro-growth economic proposal, like eliminating groceries tax altogether. We must also keep in mind that this is coming at a time when the cuts to federal budgets may sharply reduce programs and services that states like Alabama rely on. Sometimes people forget that Alabama receives $2 back for every dollar that we send to the federal government. That's why it is so critical that we take actions at the state level as we foresee these reductions in federal spending and provide local economic relief wherever we can. So as we look toward implementing economic policies that make a substantial difference, let us keep exceptional and dedicated employees like Patricia in mind, who deserves extra pay to help them get ahead, to finally see and do some of the things that they really want to do. Thank you all, and now I would like to introduce my colleague, Representative Thomas Jackson.
Thank you, Kevin. Representative Lawrence. Since 1994, by the grace of God, I've been able to represent the people of District 68. And I humbly take this opportunity not for granted, but by the grace of God, which now consists of Clark, Conecuh, Marengo, Monroe, Perry, and Wilcox counties. As you can see, I represent a diverse and diverse large area of Southwest Alabama. I also represent large employers, companies like Packing Corporations of America, Worcesterville Lumber, Georgia Pacific, Louisiana Pacific, and International Paper. Although we have a wide range of industries that we rely on heavily on forestry, which includes lumber, paper, and other products as manufacturing and packing. These companies represent sectors of the industry that all utilizes hourly employees and rely on them at different times in overtime work to meet productivity demands by the marketplace. Other times and overtime, it is necessary to fill the scheduling gap when there's an unforeseen workplace shortage. The people and families that I represent that lives in the small towns and rural areas often feel that their voices aren't heard or their struggles are ignored. Folks are tired of political talk, and what they want is action. That's why the people that I represent and in my neck of the woods are happy to see more money in their pockets as direct results of eliminating the tax on groceries and on overtime pay, I should say. It was immediately, and they would see it in their hands on Friday when they got their checks. Of course, people have always having more in their paychecks because it's money that they earn and deserve, especially now when the economy is going south and inflation is going up. You heard some of my colleagues talk about the price of eggs. And they're sky high, even though they're coming down. But what about your electric bills? The cost of living itself, and that seems to keep getting higher, and there's no end in sight. The cost of living keeps steadily rising, but wages aren't keeping up with that pace. But tax cuts make sure that the big difference in the working people's pockets. I would like also this opportunity to address another issue that is directly affecting my district, and that is healthcare. As many of you know, we have all had to deal with the fallout of hospital closures. In September this past year, Thomasville Regional Medical Center shut down in my hometown, where several hundred people lost their jobs. It was a heavy blow on our community, but it speaks to the urgency and the expanding access of healthcare and insurance in our state. The expansion of Medicaid and closing the coverage gaps to save our rural hospitals remain in danger permanently, keeping them closed. And doing so not only creates jobs, but it keeps us in our neighborhood intact. You know, I think about football on Friday nights, and what if there's an emergency on that field? We don't even have ambulance service there. No emergency room. Transport 30 miles, it could be life and death situations. But we are doing the best that we know to do because we rely on each other for support. Doing so not only creates jobs, but it keeps our neighborhood healthy and strong. For years, we have strongly supported letting Alabama join the 40 other states that have taken federal funding under the Affordable Care Act to expand the coverage gap here in Alabama, making up 130% of the poverty line. It would bring much needed funding to struggling hospitals by estimated $500 million and spur jobs creation and economic growth. I'm bringing this up because there are also types of jobs that would benefit from the permanent exemption of our overtime tax, as well as the other tax relief proposals that we are introducing that are designed to put working people first. And that's where we have failed on a national level, not putting people first. As my colleagues has mentioned, previously the federal cuts that we see coming are likely going to impact rural areas the hardest. That's why we must do everything we can immediately to help our working families here in the state, help them put food on their tables, and ease the economic uncertainty. This also means that ensuring that we have local access to affordable health care. And I'll close by saying this: it's time to put working people first. I thank you for all you've done. I want to introduce my caucus chair, Representative Barbara Drummond.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're so happy that you're here. I want to thank Representative Jackson, as well as all of the other caucus leaders who have brought you forth for this time for such a crucial issue. As many of you know, that I represent the great people of Mobile in House District 103, and the people I represent are very concerned about the economy and the rising costs that we all see, not only in our grocery store, but just in life in general. That's why the Alabama Democratic Caucus continues to focus on helping struggling Alabama families by introducing fair economic policies that will help hardworking people get ahead. This caucus is concerned about hardworking people of Alabama. In addition to the proposals like making the overtime tax exemption permanent, completely eliminating the grocery tax, and reducing the state income tax, we're also focused on long-term growth and investment to keep Alabama's economy strong in the face of uncertainty. As you know, Mobile is the 4th largest city in Alabama and home, well, I won't say we the 3rd largest city. and home to,
Huntsville is number 1.
we are the 3rd largest city, and we're home to one of the most premier saltwater port, and that's the port of Mobile, and we predict that it's going to supersede Houston very soon. That's why we're concerned about the economic impact of the tariffs and the financial consequences of a trade war, not just as it relates to Mobile, but the entire state of Alabama. Because when you look at Alabama, many of those industries dwell and have offices here. It's also why we're keeping a close eye on the variety of federal programs and services that are being cut constantly, which will likely have a negative and an immediate impact on our region. In light of these changes that are coming to the federal budget and program, it will be increasingly important for the Alabama legislature to do everything that we possibly can to adjust these shortfalls, invest in Alabama businesses, and help working families across this state. At the beginning of this session, when we discussed our legislative agenda, Forward for Freedom, we declared our support for creating an economic environment that benefits hardworking Alabamians like you. That means increasing investments in childcare, transportation, and housing for you, your family, and your community. We strongly believe in empowering new businesses to prosper by increasing means to capital and creating a pro-growth and a profitable business environment that fosters a productive environment. That's why we've introduced tax relief legislation to deal with our immediate problem of rising costs, but we also deliberately and strategically couple those tax cuts with long-term solutions like increasing affordable housing and access to child care that benefits all Alabamians regardless of your income or your zip code. We continue to say it's time for us to create an economy in which we can get ahead rather than just get by. Your freedom and your future depends on a stable but a rising economy that can withstand unforeseeable obstacles and market fluctuations. A robust, diverse, and predictable economy that helps everyone thrive, prosper, and reach their financial goals. So as we reach the middle of this legislative session, we want you all, we urge you all of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join us in providing tax relief to Alabama workers and to redouble our efforts to create an economic environment that can attract and retain good paying jobs for people throughout our great state. That's how we build a better Alabama for generations to come and march forward an economic freedom. We want an economy that thrives for all. And like we said a moment ago, we don't want you just to earn a salary to get by, but we want you to be able to get ahead. I am very pleased and honored to welcome some of the folks here who are sitting out here, as well as Nick and Mable, who are going to speak because of the overtime tax, they have been able to get ahead rather than get by in the economy of Alabama and what we've created thus far. So please welcome them. Thank you, Nick and Mable.
Good evening. My name is Mable McIntosh. I'm from Sweetwater, Alabama. I work for Georgia Pacific, the Nahiola Mill in Pennington, Alabama. And this overtime bill was something that our workers, we were able to be proud of, because we felt like that finally somebody is doing something for the workers here in Alabama. So now to hear that Alabama wants to take that away, you know, that's not right, because a lot of our overtime is forced overtime. It's not that we're volunteering for this overtime. It's mandatory because the companies that we work for, you know, they face shortages, labor shortages. So we have to work overtime to keep production going in those mills. So to have that overtime be exempt, that's important, that's well deserved. And it's something that should not be taken away from us now. We hear all of this about the cost of it or whatever, but hey, you know, find it somewhere else. You know, don't put that burden on the workers of Alabama. You know, everything is always put to the worker. Find other ways. You know, you all are the legislator. Come up with other ways other than taking something that well-deserved workers of Alabama need. You know, the cost of inflation has not gone down, okay? It's continuing to rise. So when we can get something extra in our paycheck, it helps us. We are the ones that's spending that back into our communities. We are the ones that's helping the local, the small people, you know? That's how this helps us. So we're asking you all to go to work, to find other means of taxes other than taking it, always putting it on the back of the working people.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Doty. I am one of the regular Alabamians that was referenced several times throughout this speech. There's a lot of things here that I'm not well versed enough to speak on, but there are a couple of things that I can speak on. And one of the things was he represented a worker of his, an employee of his, getting ahead by doing something so small, by getting her nails done. I can't relate to getting my nails done, but my wife, which is just a school teacher in the state of Alabama, she can. My two daughters that go to school here, they can relate to those things. And it's so important for me, for my coworkers, for everybody that I'm involved with in my day-to-day life, to see the results of the tax break that we've been given. And we want to say thank you for putting this tax break through, and we want to say thank you for continuing to fight to push for it permanently, because that's what makes a difference. For the first time, I feel like something has affected me immediately. Not the tax breaks for big companies, not tax breaks for huge corporations, but tax breaks for the regular, everyday Alabamian. So thank you for having us.
Any questions? Yes.
So just want to make it clear, and this is for everybody on the stage, if you want to jump in and answer this question, please do. When you hear about some people in the State House right now talking about, well, you know, the overtime tax isn't doing what they were supposed to do, and it's actually maybe costing us more than what we imagined it would, basically talk about repealing it. When you hear about that, how does it make you feel? And again, what message do you have for those folks?
Well, we can't afford not to extend it. Right now, where is your production gonna come from? Right now, there's a significant shortage. We know that the overtime bill has increased workforce participation. It has brought in additional revenue. And so the overtime bill is the only tax cut or tax break that we've seen that actually pays for itself. It actually generates double what it's actually costing. And so if you find another measure in the Education Trust Fund budget that helps working people, that have actually driving, doubling what is the cost and doubling the amount back into the coffers, then I can't argue with that. And so there's no other piece of legislation that has single-handedly done this. And the other thing is, the President of the United States campaigned on this issue. He won on this issue. He was able to get working people in a lot of these different states, and now they're talking about doing it at the federal level as well. So if it wasn't something that needed to be done, do you think that they would go to these measures at the federal level to try to implement something that was implemented within the state of Alabama if it wasn't? And so I think that one of the things that you could say Are they gonna use the same argument with the President of the United States, that there are some people that are defrauding it, or it's costing too much? No, they're not gonna use those arguments. And so for me, the arguments, they've not used an argument that actually forces me or anyone else to scratch their head to say, maybe we should rethink this. There's not been an argument. Instead, they're putting together tired proposals doesn't have immediate impact. That's not felt immediately. I mean, you think about this. You got eggs. You know what the cost of eggs are. You can try a 20-ounce Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever you want to call it. You've seen an increase in these costs. But have you called someone and said, thank you for saving me 1 cent on this $3 Coke? Right? And so what's the savings? Where's the savings for you, the actual consumer? This is something that I've always been taught, that you reward hard work. You don't penalize hard work. You don't tax and put taxes on the back of hard-working men and women in this country. Without the men and women that are on the front lines each and every day, there would be no economy. There would be no tax collections. So you talk about the very men and women that are still out there working each and every day. They're giving you 5% of the first 40 hours. You're talking about your law enforcement that work additional hours because they're short-staffed. You're talking about your firemen that are working additional hours because they're short-staffed. You're talking about the worker at Hyundai. You're talking about the worker at Austin. You're talking about the worker at Toyota. You're talking about workers all across the state of Alabama, whether it's a supplier, a regular manufacturer, or a chicken plant. These are the hard-working men and women that we're talking about. So if we can't reward hard-working men and women, then shame on us. But when you go through that budget, which I am, when you go through that budget line by line, and you start making them explain every item that's in the budget, and justify that, and hold that up to the litmus test, I'm going to find $230 million to cut in the budget if you want to do it. And I'm going to have some real deep conversations about the items that are in the budget. Some that are hidden, that you think are hidden in the budget. That's why the government efficiency bill is important. It's to ensure that dynamic scoring is going on all the time, and that we're not letting anything slide by without scrutiny. So if we want to do that, we'll take the remainder of the session just going through budget line by line. See, I'm ready for it. So stop bringing these weak proposals forward for headlines. Because when you tell me hardworking men and women have saved, you can't even tell me on $10 that they've saved $1.50. You point to me an item that costs $10 that this piece of legislation is going to save them $1.50. It's not. So let's get real. And let's have a real conversation about what's working and what's not.
When do you expect to introduce a bill, and what do you think the chances are?
Mike, that bill's been waiting on you to read for a long time. I have the bill already. I'm just waiting on a few more signatures before I drop it. The bill's been ready since we made some changes in it to ensure that we added ACEs in for the comfort level of some, and we were happy to do that. And I think that there's some fine people at ACEs that have been doing a good job. But I do think that we need to fund ACEs. That's another unfunded mandate. We're not putting the resources in ACEs to ensure that they are able to expand their work and the good work that they've already done out broader than they've already have. And so sometimes we like to dangle a carrot and just say, oh, this is what this is designed for. But let's actually bite into it. See if it tastes the same. And it's not the same.
How important is it to get the bill to the floor so you can make these arguments on the floor, and what do you think the chances are of that?
Mike, I'm making the arguments in the districts. I don't have to make it on the floor. If it doesn't get to the floor, I'll make them in the districts. And I got time. Thank y'all.
Thank you.